Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and this one I've been trying to think about for a little while. So the last video I posted was about Web3, and in that video I said I had an idea about how we might be able to create a more broad base of people creating content, or at least getting paid for your content, because the current system is not working as well as intended. And so by having that idea, I've been trying to figure out a solution to that idea. And unfortunately, my solution have not really come super easily, because a lot of the problems that I'm seeing, or the solutions that I'm seeing, really don't change depending on what the system is overall. The big issue is that it's just a numbers game. You just have too many people creating things, and it's almost just comes down to persistence. I think instead of talking about hoping for some utopian middle ground where the majority of us get paid for the things we really want to do, it's more of be persistent, have a niche. And that's really your two things. And basically, once you satisfy those two things, where you get really good at one thing, and then you are doing it long enough that you have a recurring base of users, that is when you can then explode or grow. And that's like where all the rest of this kind of falls into place. And why this is kind of triggered for me is this consolidation of big creative entities. Most recently, we've had Microsoft and Blizzard's, or Activision-Blizzard's, purchase for $68.7 billion. We also had Sony to acquire Bungie, which for me, it's really interesting that these kinds of deals go through. And I think it's telling for the kind of state that much of these industries are in. And that's why I think we're ready for some sort of shift or pivot from these systems. It's showing a consolidation, which means the age of the entire system has gotten mature. And so that means there's ripe for innovation, for new categories or ideas to disrupt these markets. So that's one is good and two is bad, because it makes me worried about the current state of where we are in an idea sense, because it shows that people are not risk taking. They're looking at what's out there and say, okay, that's a safe bet. And they're going to pull their chips in, right? These big giant companies see easy money out there, and they're like, let's pull those guys in, and that'll help us from like a portfolio standpoint. But that is big giant corporation thinking. That's not small, nimble individual thinking and pushing ideas further thinking. And this is me. This is where I always go with these kinds of things, because I'm a small individual and I like to think like, where could it possibly go, and what are the downstream effects for consolidation, or like bureaucracy, I guess, at a high level, right? Because when you get pulled into a giant company, now you have a whole bunch of other things get in the way. It's similar to the idea of like, how does a guerrilla style warfare beat big giant industrial powerhouse? Because they can move faster and they're decentralized and they don't need to rely on a giant infrastructure of supply and demand and kinds of things like that. They can move and be nimble and react, and provoke and just disappear. And that's where like the Web3 aspect of this kind of comes back for me, because if that stuff pulls off, or like the promises of it unfold, there is a chance that we would have more people who can make good content or good products that are not beholden to current systems. And that's what makes me really excited, because instead of relying on all of these systems that were marketed to us as a meritocratic system, saying, hey, if you make something better than other people, or something that is more entertaining than other people, you will get to some, heights. That can still happen. That is very true. but it's very far and few between. And so maybe this is no different than any other time period, just now it's changed from one form to another. And, the medium is the internet. And before it was the newspaper or your shows that you did in live or whatever it is, right? Like there's so many different things it could be, but doesn't mean that we can't try to make a better system that makes more opportunity for more people. So if that is all the case, I think there should be a limit too as to how big you want to grow, right? Like this idea of infinite growth metrics, it doesn't, there's always something about it. Like I get it fundamentally, but I also don't understand it from like just a human perspective because at least from my perspective as a creator, it the service is always me, the individual, creating things that further my human potential, which then hopefully further other people's human potential. So you're always feedback looping back and forth, and you're putting things out there that help you, that hopefully help others, and then vice versa. And it's like this constant tension or pushing forward, right? And that is not to say that you shouldn't try to be as big as possible, but I think there is a natural limit based on the person. And I think that's one of the issues where at least the modern system falls short because as soon as you have external interests involved, it's like startup investors and things like that, sure, that helps you go far or grow faster in a shorter amount of time, but you become a victim of your own success. And I think that's where it's the pitfall possibly because if you're someone, and I'm just using myself for example, like I really enjoy the idea of remaining as independent as possible because if I remain independent, then nobody can dictate how or what I say outside of my own values and those that I trust. And that I think is part of why I think I feel so strongly about improving these systems such that it allows individuals like myself to generate value so that you can continue to do things that are not where you don't have to have external sources of funding. Because external sources of funding will change the way in which you interact with your audience, no matter how much you think it won't. And I think for me, that's why this is such a strong point for me and why I see the consolidations and I get worried because it makes me think, one day do you have to become part of a giant media company, if I wanted to take Feeding Curiosity to that level, right? Like, would I have to sign a deal, be exclusive? Because part of me also thinks that if you go exclusive, you're kind of sacrificing your overall reach because you're hoping that your audience will follow you to your destination platform. And it's always been part of my goal is to just be shotgunned in as many places in the world. And that's why I've now transitioned to video because it's like not everyone is going to meet you in your standard format, right? Like if you just only write like blogs or written posts, right? Not everyone's going to want to read. So you got to go where people are. You got to do audio or you got to do video like this. And so there's all of that, right? It's kind of a lot, but again, I'm still not 100% sure. Like, is this thought just something that it just mutates in form every time there's a new technology medium like the internet does? Or is there a point where we can transcend it and be like, all right, now we have a different solution here. Now we have this like NFT thing with, I mean, it's no different than like a monthly membership profile, but my thinking is more of like, instead of using like AdSense trafficking to monetize your content, like, is there a way where you would get like a tiny amount of money from just like a click of a like or the viewing of your web page or like you get paid per engagement, like a percentage on how much people stay on a web page or right? Like you could do that stuff in a blockchain so that you get paid and it's honest. You didn't have to put ads. Like you could still do those things if that was like part of your business model, right? Like you could still throw in the mid roll ads like people already do if you so choose, but you would you could sacrifice that if that's not your forte. I think that's where the core of this is for me, is like, is there ways to do this that are not in service of ad models, where you have to subsidize your content and all the effort you put in to make something good so that you have to insert the words of another person's product that hopefully gets you paid, rather than let the merit of the very thing you made. I guess, actually, I just thought of this example right now. Imagine you bought a book, right? This might be a bad example. I guess the easiest way to put this is in audio form. Imagine a book was free and you go to a service like Audible, but instead of paying for the book, in the middle of it, or every hour or something, there was an ad, and that ad would then be what would constitute the payment of said book. There is a way that that could work, and or a model for that to work, but I think it shouldn't be that way, right? Like, you don't pre-order, like, you just accept the book for what it is, even if you don't know how much value you're going to get from it. You assume that $14.99 or whatever the cost of the book, and if you hate the book, whatever, or if you don't even finish it, you've already paid for it. I'm going to share these blog posts because I think, so there's like two quotes I want to wrap up with. The first one is from Chris Anderson, who is the founder of TED, and he has this idea of the long tail. And he predicted the internet would lead to less hit domination and more exploration of individual passions. In 2005, he wrote, "If the 20th century entertainment industry was about hits, the 21st will be about niches. This is not a fantasy. It is the emerging state of music today." I found that really interesting because I think that has evolved much more than it has previously, or much more than it ever has. We're seeing that play out with how many different niches. Like, if you go to somewhere like Twitch, right? How many different niches are there that have been garnering an audience of like 10,000 or more, or even a couple thousand or more? That, I think, says something. And then the other one is on the growth side of this thing. Rather than endless growth, the goal should be to grow as quickly as possible with technologies called hypergrowth until the break point is reached, then stop and reap the benefits of scale along stability. I thought it was telling, like, what I'm trying to get at. Maybe I'm not going for hypergrowth, but maybe I'm going for growth that is whatever level of growth you as a creator want to hit, and then get there, and then figure out how to stabilize your framework so that you can continue to grow at that pace, or not even grow, but like stabilize at that pace and then reap all of that benefits. I guess I'll leave it here, where it's like, where do you think we could implement a better model that makes content creation better for smaller creators? And I'm not saying we have to fix this overnight and say like everyone has to make a living wage, which would be awesome. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you could do that, but I think there is a way you could do this that is kind of like UBI, like universal basic income, but you could create a system that allows more people to at least maybe break even for what they create, if that makes sense. I think the goal is maybe not to go net negative for so many years and just like burn yourself out on creating things, because I think the world is better off the more people that create in general. And with that, I'll leave it all to you for this video, and I hope this makes you think, and I will see you all in the next episode.